as the kids are going, just want to encourage you to next week. This guy Bashir, who's going to be coming, is probably one of my favorite people I've ever met in my entire life. I've known him for years. He is one of my favorite people. And the stories and the things that he has seen in the world, it's outstanding. And he's going to be sharing some of those stories about what God is doing all around the world, but even here in Canada. He's one of the most high capacity people that I've ever met in my life. His life just exhausts me to even think about it. Anyway, so you're going to want to come next week. He's super awesome. Bashir Kakafi, again, one of my favorites. Anyway, while the kids are going, I want to show something to you and just to see your view on it. I gotta go and see at the bottom. I don't think his mom knows he's doing this. Let's give it a couple more seconds. So he basically hits about 70 kilometers an hour. And as you'll see in a second, this is a road that's still used by other people. And there's a car. And that's how he slows down. Yeah. So we're signing people up for a new thing that we're doing at Forward City Church. If you would like to, this is what, we want our junior hires doing this. So there's just something about stuff like that, right? There's something about stuff like that we like watching. I mean, maybe it's like you want to see, is he going to wreck? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we love watching people on the edge, don't we? Like we love somehow, some way, there's like things like Fear Factor, there's things like that. We love seeing people on the edge, whether it's emotionally, physically, that they're just on the edge, and just one small mistake could just means they lose everything. For some reason, we like watching stuff like that. Someone where there's absolutely there. Like in this context, there is no room for any kind of error. If he makes one mistake, he's gone. There's a couple of spots a little bit later on. There's actually no guardrail, and it's like a 300-foot cliff, and he makes a bad turn. One rock, like one misplaced rock, one car just out of the lane a little bit. There's something exciting about that, isn't there, though? I mean, from our own homes, our own relaxed settings, we can watch that and go, that's awesome. Maybe I could try that in a smaller place, But no, we love looking at stuff like that, but it's interesting. In our lives, we love the edge of things. We love the risks. We love seeing things where it could go this way or it could go that way, but in our lives, we don't like seeing that. We like seeing other people kind of in an entertainment context, but when we start to see that in our lives, we see other things where other people are kind of living on the edge. Maybe not so much through the recreation, but living on the edge maybe in other areas, Maybe the edge financially. Maybe the edge morally. It's interesting. So we look at things like this, and I could have shown others. We just don't have enough time. But there's many other things we can look at where we just love watching people where they're just right on the edge of failure and excitement. But if we stop and look at our lives for a little bit, we see people living on the edge all the time, but it's not that exciting, is it? It's really not that exciting because it's not something you're going to put on TV. It's not something you want to watch. It's something because you're looking at someone's life, someone maybe you care about, someone you really love, and you're seeing them live life on the edge. So much on the edge in their particular life that there's really no margin for error. If they make one mistake financially, it's done. We know people like that. We've been in situations like that. You know, we're in a situation in our lives where if one wrong bill comes in or one thing happens, one unexpected thing, we're just kind of on the edge financially. For some people, they're on the edge relationally. I mean, it's no fun watching a married couple who's on the edge of on the ropes in their marriage. They're on the ropes so much that it's just one more relationship, one more issue, one more thing around them that hits them. It's going to be the one thing that's going to push them over the edge. And they're like, you know what, I'm done, I'm out. We see people kind of on that edge, and it's not really exciting to see. We don't know people like that. We're just on the edge. We're just one bad thing, one more thing, the straw that breaks the camel's back, or whatever phrase you want to use. One more thing, and it's over. There's nothing exciting about seeing someone on the edge of morality where it just seems like if they just cross this line because they're so close and so close and they're so close and they cross that line, it's going to ruin things forever. We say this all the time that, you know, a lot of us are like 5 minutes away from destroying our lives. It's not exciting to see people on that kind of an edge. There's really no fun watching someone whose life is so full, their schedule is so packed in that they have an opportunity to see things, but they miss it because they're just so incredibly busy. Their life is on the edge because they're more concerned about what's next than what's there. See, it's interesting. So for the next little while, we're going to be talking about this thing called margin because we live in a culture that pushes us to the limit. Like we live in a culture that wants us to get more and more and to succeed and to get out there. And I think those things are really, really good things. But in a lot of ways in our lives, we pretty much live out of balance. That our life and the culture is pushing us to the edge for more and more and more and more. And I know a lot of you have high capacity. You're very high capacity people, and I understand that. But how many would you say, you don't have to raise your hands, but how many would you say that you occasionally or regularly feel stressed about what's going on in your life? Like, do you feel stressed ever? Again, you don't have to raise your hand. I'll do it for you. I do. I mean, how many of you ever have felt stressed financially? That you just have this kind of financial stress trying to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Our kids are going to go to school. Life, what are we going to do here? How many would you say there's just not enough time? There's not enough money. There's not enough emotional capacity to be able to handle the things that are around me and the issues and the people and the problems. See, the problem is we live in a culture that wants to suck up every moment. If you have time, I want to take it. See, we live in a culture that pushes us to the limit to do more, to accomplish more, to conquer more. But we know and you've experienced this, and I've experienced this, and we've experienced this together, that the more we add to our schedule, the more we plan, the less balance in our lives that we have. And see, so just for this kind of series, just for a little bit, we're going to kind of take a break from the 1 Corinthians for a few minutes or for a few weeks, and we're just going to talk about this in our lives because I just want to lovingly tell you that busyness, that on the edge living isn't God's plan for you. Like, did you know that God has actually something else in mind for you? He has something else in mind for your schedule. He has something in mind for you. He has something else in mind, not a life of running from here to there, but a life that's filled with margin in it. So when we talk about margin is what we have that's unallocated. Like margin, it's the difference between what you have and what you need. Margin, it's the extra. It's the breathing room. If you need this amount of time to get, you have to be there in this amount of time, but you get there in an early amount of time, that space there, that's margin. When you look at a book, and when you read a book, it's that white space around there is margin. It's space. Have you ever seen a book that's actually written to the edge? It's weird. Like it messes with our eyes. We like to see the margin around it. Margin is what we have on the 401. When you're driving on the 401, you have margin. And what that margin is there's space. When you're driving 120 kilometers an hour, if you do that, just saying some people do, you're driving 120 kilometers an hour down one way, the other one's coming the other direction. They're not just right next to you. There's a space there. We like margin, right? They're not just 3 inches or 3 feet away from you. We like them to be further. That's what margin is. When you go to a coffee shop or you fill up a cup of coffee, and when you fill it up, and you say, just fill it up, no, nothing in it, whatever, they always leave a little bit of room. That's called margin. Because you ever had someone fill it up all the way before when you got to do that counter sip, right? You ever done the counter sip before? It was just so hot. Or you're trying to carry it when it's really high. You spill it, right? We understand we want a little bit of margin in our lives. See, the truth is that we want margin on the 401. We want margin with our coffee. We want margin with other things. But we also need margin in the critical areas of our life, because this is what we're going to learn over the next couple of weeks is this. That for many of us, at times, our lives are unsustainable. See, we need margin in our lives. See, margin in the context of our lives, it's like getting to the end of the month and still having money. I think margin is still having money left over so you can do things, you can experience things, you can save, or you can give. That it's having money at the end of the month. Margin is distance between you and temptation, rather than living on the moral edge all the time. But having buffer around you, having space around you, so that one step isn't going to lead you into something that's going to destroy your family and your life. Margin is about when you get into a disagreement or a crisis in your life and you have the emotional ability to be able to deal with it without losing your mind. To be in a particular situation when something comes in and a kid says this and it's like, I can't handle this anymore. I'm so overwhelmed. That's margin to be able to handle that to where you're not going to explode. Margin is the space for you and me as followers of Christ to have significant time with God, not just a quick God bless this food, and all that kind of stuff, and it's all over. See, we need breathing room. You and I need margin, and many of us understand this because we've experienced the downside of not having space, to not having breathing room in our lives, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. See, we know we need it, but it's the one thing that we have very little of. And I don't know about you. Maybe this isn't going to be you. This is going to be really me. I've had to deal with this over the course of the last number of months in my life. And I've realized I was a bit out of balance. As my margins were continue to get smaller and smaller, and I did it because of guilt and all those things. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but I was losing the balance. And I saw my life getting kind of near other people in my story in years past whose margin continued to shrink and shrink and shrink, and to the point where they got to a place in their lives where they couldn't come back from it. Because see, it's what's so important is, and why it's so sad we don't have margins, because I believe this, and you understand this, you get this, that some of the most important things, some of the best things, some of the things that you remember for the rest of your life happens in the margins. One of my most incredible memories is we were at the cottage with our daughters a number of years ago when they were small. And one of my daughters, we had this whole thing planned out. We're going to go canoeing. We're going to do this. And we had the whole day planned out. It was a beautiful day, and we just had everything planned. But for a little while, we were upstairs playing with her Polly Pockets. And I'm thinking to myself, this is it. Let's go. We're at the cottage. We have a canoe. We have kayaks. Let's go outside. It's time to go. And we just played Polly Pockets for a little bit. At the very end of all of it, at the very end of our week, we come home. We say, hey, so what was your favorite part about the cottage? Was it the s'mores? Was it the campfires? Was it the hiking? Was it the water? Was it everything? She said, it's when you played Polly Pockets with me. Like, what? We can do that anywhere. But so often in our lives, we're going to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and we miss sometimes what's right in front of us in the moments that are important. We can get so busy with things and miss what's really, really important in front of us. See, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about what it's like to pull back from the edge. What it's like to pull back. Now, maybe you're in a particular place in your life where everything is kind of rolling well, you're in good rhythm, and you get it. But there's other times in our lives where we're just a bit out of balance, and we're stressed, and there's a little bit of tension there. Because maybe your life is in good balance, and you feel like you have good rhythms, and you have good margin in your life, but maybe your spouse doesn't. Maybe your kids don't think so. So we're going to talk about that in the different areas of our lives. Because God actually has a different plan for you and a different plan for me. Not life on the edge, but life with breathing room, life with margin. In Luke chapter 10, it's a really interesting story. We've talked about this before. We'll talk about it again. It's just a powerful story. Two different women, sisters, were together. Same opportunity, same circumstances, same everything, but made two different decisions. And it made the difference in different ways in their lives. And so if you have your Bibles, Luke chapter 10, we're going to put it on the screen too so you can see it. But it's a very familiar story, and I feel kind of bad about this lady named Martha, but she gets a bad rap because Martha's is pretty awesome. But in Luke chapter 10, as Jesus and his disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him to her home. That's cool. I got a question for you. When you're welcoming people into your home, what do you do to prepare? It really depends on who you're preparing for, right? It really depends on if they're really, really close friends or whatever. I mean, you still got your sweatpants on, and you're like, come in, the door's open, just get what you want. We have people like that in our lives, right? We got that. It might be someone else, maybe the mother-in-law or someone else is coming to the house. And so you put out maybe the good napkins, right? The only napkins you're supposed to use when good, you actually put those little rings on the napkins, which I have no idea what those are for. You can take them off anyway. I don't know. You prepare things. When someone comes to your house, when you just kind of know them pretty well, you just do a quick wipe down, make sure there's no overspray in the bathroom, there's extra toilet paper, that kind of stuff. You just do a little quick cleanup. They'll be fine. But other people, it's like, whoo. We need to go to town with this. Right? We get it. It depends, right? No, you can imagine this particular culture. So that's us. But culturally, in this particular context, to be hospitable was the utmost importance for people. To be hospitable. This told a story for the rest of your life. Guests were meant to be welcomed into their family circle and treated with the utmost generosity, the utmost honor. And if failing to do so would give you a bad rap all through the city, you weren't hospitable. So this is a super important time. Reputations were tarnished if you were a bad host. Now, at this point in time, they didn't really understand who Jesus was fully. They just knew that he was the rock star of the day. They knew that he was the best teacher and he was the most influential teacher. They knew that wherever he went, amazing things happened. They knew that there was something very, very special about him. And maybe there was a bit of a glimmer. Could this be the one? Could this be the one that we've been praying for? Could this be the one that we have been searching for all of our lives? Could this be the one who's going to free us from oppression and give us new life? Could this be the one? I think it is. It might be. Other people said they were. Other people claimed to be. But this one's backing it up with miracles. He's amazing. And he's coming to my house. And here she was. The Bible says she was getting everything ready. It says this. Her sister, Mary, sat at the Lord's feet. This is her sister. This is the one who's working with her in this context. And instead of helping her get everything ready, because this isn't just anybody, this is Jesus. You want to get everything just right. And her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. And I want to get a bad rap for this girl because we do that, and I get it. But this is a different context. See, it's interesting. These two women had the exact same opportunity. The exact same opportunity to make a decision, but Mary created a moment that she probably had other things to do. She probably had other things she could have done. She probably could have helped in a number of different ways. There probably could have been some things that she could have done here to help her sister out. But she had the choice. She said, should I do that or should I do what's right in front of me? And she said, for the moment, not going to do that. For the moment, even though it is important, even though it needs to be done, in this moment right here, I'm going to choose to put that aside, and I'm going to embrace this moment with Jesus. But Martha, on the other hand, was like many of us. She was distracted. See, it's interesting to me that she wasn't distracted by things that are bad. She wasn't distracted by things that were wrong. She wasn't distracted by things that were sinful. She's distracted by the same kind of things that we were distracted by. Like, we might say they were actually good things. And some of us push back on this story a lot because we're like, well then who would have cooked? Who would have cleaned? Who would have done that? I get all those arguments because I say the same things. But in this moment, it was evident. In this moment, it was important. And she was choosing which was more important. Because the reality is many of us would have been distracted by the same thing she was distracted by. Someone said this, and it wasn't me, and someone's been saying this for years, that if Satan, our enemy, can't make us really bad, he's going to try to make us really, 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 really busy. If he can't make us bad, if he can't make us do the wrong things or kind of go in the wrong directions, if he can't tempt us so much, he's going to pull us away from the things that are right. He's going to make us so incredibly busy that we forget about the right things that we're supposed to do. And the reality is, the reason why we're talking about this is because so many of us are consumed. We're obsessed with accomplishing the urgent. We've talked about this before. To accomplish what we think is the most important, but we're missing oftentimes what the most important things in life actually are. In the middle of the verse, Martha comes out running to Jesus. She's a little upset. She's a little ticked off right now. And she says this. She says, Jesus, don't you care that my sister has left me to do this work by myself? Tell her to help me, exclamation mark. Like, don't you care, Jesus? I mean, here you are sitting doing your thing. Okay, yeah, you do your thing, but get her to help me because this is part of her job too. She's slacking. She's lazy. She needs to be doing this. Get her by my side. I'm correct here, Jesus. See, she was convinced that what she was doing was the right thing, the important thing. I'm here doing this, and she's just sitting there being lazy. And the reality is, as I was reading this again and have read this multiple times in my life, that most of us are often convinced that our lifestyle is okay, that our pace is okay. See, we're all convinced that even maybe some of you are sitting back and we're talking about this. You're going, no, okay, that I'm glad my wife is here to hear this. Maybe you're wrestling with this. Is this what about me? See, we're convinced that we're okay. It's just a season. We'll talk about this later in our schedules. We're going to talk about what that looks like later in a different day. But like, oh, it's fine. It's just a season. It's going to get over. But we'll talk about that. But we're convinced that what we're doing is okay. And then Jesus comes out and he says, Jesus, tell her to help me. I'm right. This is the way it should be. And Jesus says, no. Your production mindset missed the moment. And then he says, Martha, Martha. And if you read it in a different version, he says, dearest Martha. Dearest Martha. You're worried and upset about many things. But only one thing is needed right now. This doesn't mean you can't help out later. It doesn't mean you can't do other things. It doesn't mean you should never, when someone comes over, just do whatever you want. No, I'm not saying that. But this one thing is needed. And Mary has chosen what is better. And it will not be taken away from her. I'm not going to tell her to stop. I'm not going to tell her to help. Because what you've chosen is the busy. She's chosen in this moment what is right. Now, family, this is me as your pastor, as your friend, as part of your family. That I know this may sound kind of hard here, but you actually have a choice for what you have time for. You have a choice. You have time for what you choose to have time for. A lot of us go sit back and say, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to slow down. I have to do this and this. But the reality is you actually do have a choice to what you have a choice for. Like you have a choice to decide what you're going to do. And I know that even as I say this, I know there's pushback. And I know a lot of people would say to me, hey, Mark, you work one day a week. You don't understand what it's like in the real world. Like, Mark, you work one day a week, so you don't get it, what it's like to have to do this and this and this. I volunteer, I do this. Mark, you don't get it. Because listen, and I hear that all the time. You don't understand what it's like in the real world. Because if I don't keep up like this, I'm going to fall behind. If I don't keep going and going, I'm going to miss out. If I'm going to keep going, I'm not going to get in. If I don't keep going, my kids are going to miss out. If we don't give this opportunity and this opportunity, one day they're going to miss it, and one day they're going to wish that they had this, and we got to give them everything. If I slow down, I'm not going to get what I want. If I slow down, I'm not going to succeed. And what some people worry about is if I slow down, if I don't keep going and going and going, people are going to realize maybe I just don't matter. See, you can make excuses. You can make changes so that you can grow. But you can't do them both. You can choose to continue at the pace that you're in, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially. You can continue in that pace, but if you continue to live a marginless life, if you continue to allow your margin to shrink and shrink and shrink, there's a couple of things that are going to happen. If you're taking notes, this is two things that are going to happen. There's probably more, but two things are going to happen. When your margin decreases, your stress level increases. And we've seen this, right? When you're driving in a car and you have to be there, you have to be somewhere in 10 minutes, but it's going to take you 15 to 20 minutes to get there still. And then you hit a train. Anyone? Right? That margin, what happens in those moments? Do you get less stressed or more stressed? More stressed. Now, if it's not a big deal, that's fine. But if you have to be somewhere, there's something important, and you got to be there. What happens when that happens? How many times do you look at your clock? What's your driving pattern? How does it change? Does it change? Yes, it does. When you hit the light, you're going to hit. You're going to make that yellow. You get a little bit more stressed. What else happens? Like you're in a car, you're with with someone else, and then what the blame game starts happening because you know you're going to be late, and you know there's going to be some consequences from being late. The blame game happens. You know what? The next time, honey, could you just be ready? Quit taking the time. You ever had the blame game before? Whose fault is it? Man, those kids, next time, I told you before, get your breakfast. We start to blame. Stress goes up. The blame game starts to happen. I mean, how many times you look at the clock thinking it's going to change, it's going to get better, you're going to get there quicker, try to beat the time. How many try to beat the GPS in any aspect? Me. I love that. 10 minutes, not going to happen. It's going to be 5. We try to do that. Stress goes up. This wouldn't have happened if you wouldn't have. Because when margin decreases, your stress level increases. Think of it in the financial context. When you look at your finances, when margins are already tight in your life. I mean, all it takes is something to break, something to go wrong, and then you have two problems. Something broke, and you've got to fix it. You got to pay to get it done, and you may not have that financial margin in those situations, and it's like, oh my goodness. Maybe some of you are struggling because you're sitting there, and your kids are wondering, why is Dad always mad? Why is he always upset when I mention something about school, or I mention something about camp, or I mention something, or when he's looking at the paper, when the mail comes in, why is he always stressed? Because oftentimes we're so stressed because we're living on the edge financially. And I get it. You're sitting back saying, Mark, you don't know what it's like. I get it. I understand that. Look, we're going to talk about that another day. Because oftentimes we're so stressed financially is because the need is bigger than the account. So today, if you feel stressed out, overwhelmed, or on the edge, or burnt out, or on the edge of that, it's probably because you lack margin somewhere in your life. Another thing that happens when you lack margin is that as margin decreases, your relational intimacy also decreases. And what I mean by that is We see this all the time. When you're busy and you're frustrated and you're challenged, your mind rarely ever goes to good things. It often goes to negative things. When we're really stressed, when we're really busy, when we have little margin, the people that we're closest to are the people that we spend really the less time to. We can be present with them, but we're not really present. You ever been on a vacation before and you've had so many other things in your life going on and you're so busy still doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, but when you're on vacation, you're supposed to rest? You ever had those moments in your life before? You ever been with your kids and really not actually been with your kids because you're so busy doing other things? To be sitting down and then finally you just sit down with your spouse and it's like we're so busy and like, oh, finally we're going to rest, but we don't actually be together. You ever been with someone but thinking about what's going on around you and what still has to be done that you kind of really miss the depth of the conversation? We'll talk about schedules again and how this fits into that a little bit later on, but when your relational intimacy decreases, when your margin decreases, your relational intimacy also decreases. But it's not just with people, but it's also with God. You know this. I know this. What's the first thing we stop when we're financially stressed? We stop being generous. What's one of the first things we do when our schedule is stressed? We don't spend time with God. And for those of you who are Christians, you guys know the importance of spending time with God. And you and I know that when we're super, super marginless, the first thing we push off is God. I'm not a man. People say, I'm just not as close as I used to be. Me and God just don't have the kind of relationship that we used to have. And it's because you got too busy. Now, why is this important? Like, why are we talking about this? A lot of us, so many plan on, why do we plan on slowing down but never actually really do? You think of it? Well, I'm going to slow down, but we never actually do it. Why is it that we say money doesn't make us happy and yet we still go for more and more and more? Why is it that we don't radically cut back on our schedules and our spending? Why is it that we don't do that? Why is it that we don't radically cut down on the busyness of our kids and our lives and all of those things? Why don't we do that? And the bottom line, and this may not be for you, but for most of us, the bottom line is that we don't fully trust God. That's really why we keep going and more and more and more, because we really have a hard time trusting God that He's really in control of my life, and that if I choose to say no, it's still going to be okay because He's okay. We often struggle with the fact that God still handles all the details of life, and that if I don't say no, if I say no, if I don't do this, if I don't keep going more and more, I'm not going to have this and this and this, and God somehow isn't going to step in the gap. See, we're afraid if we don't keep going, we're going to miss out on something that's out there. How many of you have a struggle with the fear of missing out? We do. We all do that. That somehow, some way, this elusive something that's out there, if we continue to go, if we continue to get, we're going to get what this elusive thing is, and that's going to deeply fill our hearts. So we keep going for more. We keep adding things more. We keep seeking more. I got to work harder. I got to make more money. I got to have nicer this. I got to have this. I got to get to that meeting. I got to. But if you don't, you're going to miss out on something that you're longing for. So we keep going and going. But the search, and this is the thing, the search for this is we often miss out on what's more important. You've experienced this, and I have too. The more we keep going and going, we often miss the moments. We often miss the things that are most important while we're chasing the things that are going to be empty in the end. There's this, worship team, you guys come up. There's this thing, we talked about this, I looked at my notes. We talked about this actually probably, the first year of our church here. There's this thing called a silent room. It's a really interesting thing, and it's kind of an interesting, it's in South Minneapolis. And this room that's 99.99% soundproof. It's got 3-foot thick fiberglass acoustic wedges, double wall insulated steel, concrete that's over a foot thick, and it holds the Guinness Book of World Record ability for the quietest place on earth. Now, it's interesting. We think quiet. Okay, I guess so. I mean, as humans, we can detect sounds above 0 decibels. And a typical quiet bedroom at night measures about 30 decibels. So just for a moment, no noise, just complete silence. Ready? Silence, please. Okay. That's super quiet, right? Right? It's interesting, though. This is probably over 30 decibels. This particular room, when you're in this and you're sitting in a chair, you're sitting there, it actually has a negative 9 decibels. So it's virtually soundless. Now, it's interesting. They actually, it's so soundless. It's so unique, and it's so weird because we're so used to hearing kind of ambient sound. The world record for a person to actually be in this room by themselves is only 45 minutes. They can't stay any longer. Because having little sound like that kind of ruins your brain. They rent this out to actually train their astronauts. Whirlpool actually used this thing to kind of test the quietness of their washing machines. Harley Davidson actually used to use this to find out how to make their machines quieter, which that's never going to happen. The president, this guy Steve Ortfield, the president of this company that created the Soundproof Lab, he says that when he goes in, he can actually hear the artificial valve in his heart tick because it's so quiet. It's people inside the chamber. They say they can actually hear their stomach, which isn't super rare. They can hear their heart. They can even hear their ears because apparently when there's no noise, your ears make a sound that you can't even hear because we have so many other things going on. The idea is that the quieter the room is, the more you will hear. See, the reality is it's hard to listen to God. It's hard to see the important when there's so many noises going on in our lives. See, we all have this stuff, and we all wonder, and we struggle to hear God. We struggle to see God. We struggle with all of these things because we don't intentionally isolate ourselves from the noise and the busyness to actually hear God and give him the space to speak. We don't have the margin in our lives to actually see God. And it's no wonder we often sit back and say, I don't see God. God's not that real. I don't see his power. I don't see his grace. I don't actually hear him. He doesn't do anything really amazing. And probably the reason why is because we're so busy with everything else, looking at other places, worrying about this and worried about that, chasing this and chasing that. We actually miss the most important things in our lives. We just don't give him the space to speak. And I believe with all of my heart, that if we get the opportunity to do this well, if we actually get the opportunity to just stop and close things down for a few moments, and we just stop for a few moments, I believe in those moments that we're going to hear something really extravagant and really important and really wonderful from God. And I believe it's going to be this, that he's going to say to us this: come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened. So we don't think of coming to God when we're burdened, when we're busy, when we're at the edge of life, at the edge financially, at the edge emotionally, at the edge spiritually, at the edge. We don't think of coming to God. We think about, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to add? What do I need to read? What do I need to get to? And sometimes God's like, no, just shut it down and just come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened. You know, to paraphrase this, come to me, all of you who are stressed out. Come to me, single parents, when you feel your life is falling apart. Come to me, the busy person who thinks that if you don't continue to going, everything's going to fail. Come to me, parent who has no margin in your life for yourself. Come to me, those who feel overwhelmed and feel insignificant because you're so busy all the time. Come to me. And what does Jesus say? And I will what? I will give you what? What's the word? Rest. Later on, he says, rest for your souls. So here's what we're going to do this week. As we talk about margin in our lives, and again, maybe if you're kind of in that beautiful rhythm of space, good, keep that. That's awesome. But there's going to be times when things are going to come in, circumstances are going to come in. We're going to feel a little bit out of balance. The temptation is to continue to shrink our margins. So just what I'm going to ask you to do for this week and next week. If we talk about this again, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I want to challenge you, for those of you who are online, for those of our home church online right now, I want to challenge you guys to do this exactly same thing too. I want to challenge you to spend 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes where you're not reading, accomplishing, or doing anything. Not looking at anything, not walking, not thinking about it. Just, I want you to spend 5 minutes, just 5 minutes a day where you're not trying to accomplish, try to plan, where you just spend that 5 minutes and say, God, speak to me. If you really want to add even more than that, just, maybe open the Bible, read a psalm or something, read a proverb, and then just put that aside and just not prayer, not talking, just God, here's 5 minutes. Set a timer or whatever you need to do. Spend 5 minutes quiet and let him speak. If we do that, I don't know what God's going to say. I don't know what he's going to do, but I imagine if we do this is going to help us take that first significant step of building margin into our lives. Because I know you know and I know this, is that when we continue to push to the end of the page in our lives, we miss the moments. We miss the opportunities. We miss the beauty. But when you live according to the rhythms of his grace, you'll never be the same. And just as Jesus said to Martha in that moment, that Mary chose the better, and it will never be taken away from her. Margins. Because blessing happens in the margins. So we're going to talk about this for a couple weeks. Because I love you. And because I really need this. 5 minutes a day for a couple weeks, and we're going to talk about that again.